Okay, well, today it's as Barbara said, this is our second annual virtual garden tour, and it's very special. And we're going to see some hidden gems in Hyde Park without having to risk the rain or traipsing from one end of Hyde Park to the other in this humidity and heat. Um, we will have two private gardens and we will have four public gardens, which many of you, I think, have not seen or don't know or appreciate. So this is a very special opportunity. Um, and I will turn it over to our very first presenter, who is George Rumsey. He's longtime Hyde Park gardener and activist and knows all about Nichols Park. George?
Let me launch my share, please, and pull up the presentation. Thanks to Sylvia, I have the slides for all the presenters today so we can run it streamlessly, we hope straight through seamlessly. So you other presenters, when you get ready to talk, just be sure to tell me when to move, keep me moving. And thanks to Sylvia for pulling all of this together. So hopefully you're able to see this. Can everyone see the slide okay? Yay, nay? Nod your head, somebody. So this is our Hyde Park Village garden tour for 2021. And thank you all for picking me. To start it off, I'm wearing my garden fair hat today. So I thought instead of just talking about my yard, I'd really like to talk about what the garden fair does. We're all sort of depressed at the moment. We just announced yesterday that we're not going to be able to do the fall garden fair. We can't get approval to use the space over in the shopping center, so we've had to cancel the fall fair. So instead, I thought I would do something different. Instead of talking about what we're going to have at the fair, I'm going to talk about what we do with the money that we earn from the fair. I'm always amused that none of our customers ask us, not very frequently, what happens to the money that you make. And this picture in front of you shows you where the money goes, because Nichols Park is our #1 project for supporting. We have several areas of the park that we work in. The main area that I'm involved with is what we call the formal beds, the north end of Nichols Park, the part that's along 53rd Street. Thanks to the strong intervention and arm twisting of then Alderman Tony Preckwinkle, about 20 years ago, the Garden Fair reached an agreement with the Chicago Park District to completely redesign this area of the park and to give the Garden Fair control over the plantings, the gardens, and the selection of plants, and then the maintenance over time. And what we have found is that over time, plants get old and plants die. So right now we're going through a phase where we're really redesigning and rebuilding the gardens. A lot of the shrubs, the larger pieces, have aged out. They've been in the ground for 25 years. We've gotten great duty out of them. And this little chart that you see in front of you is our work plan. This is actually the work plan that we had for this year. You'll see various little plant pictures showing plants that we wanted to drop in, like chelone and phlox and triceratops and various geraniums and stuff. You'll notice in this diagram there are certain spots that the only term for them is they're problem spots. The fountain, which is sitting here in the middle of the diagram, this large bed over at the side, what we call the horseshoe at the west end of the park, and then at the east end of the park are beds that the park district decided they really needed to plant some very thick shady trees in, so we have total shade in them. So we're having conversations about how best to deal with these issues. We had one other issue come up recently, which is in this bed down here that has the name George next to it. There was a very big old tree that decided to do us a favor and fall down. Thankfully, it just barely missed the fountain and didn't crush it. And it turned this from a bed where nothing would grow, nothing would live except some rather hideous yews. We now have a whole new bed to plant, so that will be the focus of my talk right now, about what we're adding to this whole new bed. But starting from the middle of the whole formal gardens is the fountain. The picture here in the lower left-hand corner is how the fountain looked about 7 years ago. It was overwhelmed by the plantings. There were Bonica roses, there were boxwoods, there were cotoneasters, there was ivy growing around it. And these are all things that are difficult to control, that are finicky to work with, and the fountain itself had disappeared. You couldn't even see the fountain. You couldn't hear the water splash. You couldn't see the water. So when we started talking about remaking, we decided to start with a fountain. We cleaned out everything that was around it, took it down to the soil, and we decided to go with one plant. Good old cotoneasters, which are very hardy, can take a lot of abuse. The ones that we have are the cranberry varieties that have these wonderful little red berries. They will grow and fill in this area. They should get as high as this ridge of the fountain, which will allow you to still see the water. And I'm happy to report that so far the feedback's been very positive, because I walk through here every day on my way to work, and there are always people out taking pictures and throwing pennies. We also restored the sidewalk so you could actually go up to the fountain and look in the water. The dogs can get in and play. The Horseshoe Bed on the west end of the park. It's the area that we wanted to be a focal point, and we've debated for as long as we've been in Nichols Park what to do with it. For the last 10 years, we've been on this process with begonias. Let me tell you, I am so tired of begonias. After planting the begonias, it takes 18 flats of begonias to fill this bed every year. And it takes a lot of work to try to create these cute little patterns and designs with it. So we finally decided this year we ain't going to do that anymore. We've had enough of trying to maintain that as a show area. And instead, it's now looking as this rather weedy looking patch down here at the bottom. But what the weedy looking stuff actually is sedum, that we have filled it with 5 different varieties of sedum, such as this dragon's blood, the red sedum sitting right here at the bottom center. And sedum is heat tolerant, drought tolerant, blooms for a very long time, and we've planted it in red, pink, and yellow, so we're hoping that we will have a tapestry of color that will last all summer. It is, of course, surrounded by the horseshoe shape of knockout roses, which we've underplanted lamium, pink pewter, to keep color going in there, the ground cover. And it's backed by the tall spires of Calamagrostis Carl Foster, my favorite grass in all the world. Very tall, very erect, so that we have winter, architecture in the garden space as well. The other problem bed is the one that all the garden fair people hate hearing me talk about, because I'm always ranting about this. This is the Rudbeckia bed. We tried various things over the years, from Cosmos, which was very pretty but really floppy and just looked messy and strangled. So about 5 years ago, we ordered $800 of Rudbeckia to plant in this bed, one solid mass of Rudbeckia. We had 5 different varieties that would bloom from June up through October, and it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then between our volunteers and the park district, it all got yanked out. It all got pulled out. It's dead. They've quit blooming. So we weeded it out for you, so you'll have a nice bed next year. So $800 worth of Rudbeckias down the drain. We replaced it with other things, and we're slowly restoring the Rudbeckias, the black-eyed Susans. We'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. Finally, the other trouble area is the shade beds, and this is Hyde Park. What do you do in shade? Well, hostas, so we obviously have our hosta bed. What I like what we've done with the hosta bed, however, is we've underplanted it with wild ginger, asarum, which has the tiny little brown flower in the spring, and the leaves make a very nice, I think, complementary shape to the hosta leaves. We need to do some filling then. But I think this is going to mature nicely. And then we suddenly discovered that good old-fashioned tiger lilies do great in the shade. So we've been filling the beds in with self-seeding tiger lilies to put some color in with all the rest of the shade. The new bed is where the tree fell down. And this is a good example of the logic that is behind the entire formal gardens. In every bed, there's supposed to be 3 shrubs as a centerpiece, one of them showing color. Usually we've used barberry, although we are looking at other things to bring the color. In this particular new bed, we put next to it viburnum. I cannot find out what variety of viburnum this is. I have it somewhere in my notes and I can't locate it. It has a very lovely pink and white flower with a scent, and it does not get huge like some of the viburnums. And then you can't really see in this picture, but way off to the edge, this little bit of yellow off to the edge is a Caryopterous. Caryopterous does not do great in Chicago. In some environments, it will, form a tree, but it lives here, and it has. This is a bright yellow one, and of course, it gets blue flowers in September and October. So we're watching it to see how that will do. That's an experiment, and we'll see how it works out. So it also occurred to me that nowhere in this garden do we have
So,
phlox.
George,
Yes, please.
passed your 5 minute mark. You passed your 5 minute mark. Just a
Okay,
warning.
great. Let me just pack right through the phlox because you all know what phlox is. Here's the other plants that we've been putting in for butterflies because, of course, we want to be the attractor. Introducing new plants into the garden. Daylilies is the one word I wanted to get out. You all need to go back and re-examine daylilies because they're wonderful now, reblooming and bloom for a very long time, and that forms the new bed. And then if you look at the sidewalk down the left-hand side and you start walking south, you end up somewhere else. Dan?
That's my cue. Just a sound check. Am I coming through clear?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. So I'm one of
Dan, could I introduce you?
Please
I was supposed to introduce George too, but he introduced himself. So now I find out what to do, and I'd like to introduce you. And it was a big treat to meet Dan Brown in the wildflower meadow and see the meadow come alive with plants and flowers you would never see if you just hurry by. So here's Dan to show you what he showed us when we were there. Thank you. Your turn.
Okay. So I have been steward of the wildflower meadow, I think 4 or 5 years now. You lose track of time. The meadow doesn't change, so you just enjoy each season. I essentially took it over officially from Christine Vollmer, but before her was a longtime steward of the meadow, Carol Schneider. I don't know if anyone knows her. And I started volunteering in the meadow under Carol. Where should I go with this? This is a rather small garden. It's smaller than the formal gardens that George just talked about. It's 1/3 of an acre. It's the second smallest natural area in the Chicago Park District across the city. Smallest one's only 1/4 acre. We're 1/3 of an acre. But we have a lot of fun things in the meadow, and we have a beautiful path that walks through it that you can take through it. The land is graded a little bit, so it's up a slight hill. And you have a split rail fence that if you want to stop and enjoy the flowers, it makes a wonderful bench. So I recommend walking through it if you're in Nichols Park. In the picture on the left-hand side, you see a wood structure there. We were one of 20 natural areas in the city that had a fairy house installed this summer. That was a project in conjunction with the Hyde Park Neighborhood Club, and the kids at the club helped to build that. So that's there. It's till late August, I think. So if you haven't seen it, it's a good time to go out and see it before it gets moved away. So next slide, George. So the focus of the wildflower meadow is, of course, wildflowers. My wife refers to it as my weed patch, and that's okay. A lot of people call wildflowers weeds, but we try to propagate a variety of wildflowers, and we try to take out invasive species. And sometimes that includes beautiful flowers that I try to pawn off to the formal garden, or there's a couple other gardens in Nichols Park that can take them. So all of these are natives here, including the one on the right that I've tried to place it. It might be a North American sunflower variety of some kind, but I just haven't been able to get it. And if we go to the next slide, again, more flowers that we've seen over the past couple months. We have been trying to collect seeds on many of these and spread them, so we're getting more of these as time goes by. We have pictures from June and July flowers. If you walk through now, you'll see that the goldenrod is starting to bloom out. We have obedient plant that is starting to bloom. And we have a very tall variety of ironweed, which has a lovely deep purple color, and that's starting to bloom. Next slide. What we started in the past few years is to propagate native grasses. So we have inland oats. Also, I've heard it called northerly sea oats, and bottlebrush rye and wild Canada rye. You see pictures of those here. We're hitting the season now where for the bottlebrush and wild Canada, the seeds have matured, and we're collecting the seeds. After we pull a lot of the plants down in the fall, we'll scratch those seeds in the ground and hopefully year by year get a whole lot more native grasses in the meadow. Next slide. So I've worked with the Park District. They used to come through and help us out, in quotes, by putting herbicide on a lot of the invasives. I have a energetic volunteer crew that will pull these out by hand, and I prefer that to happen. One, because we try to support a lot of native insect and animal life. The second thing is a lot of families and even like nursery school groups walk through there. So I'm trying to keep the meadow as organic as possible. Next slide, George. And we do get a lot of butterflies and moths in there. We have propagated butterfly milkweed as well as smooth milkweed. We get a lot of monarchs. Sometimes you see two of them chasing each other. It's either a dog fight or it's a mating dance. You have to watch it and figure out which it is. But we also get hummingbird moths and a lot of the larger night moths if you ever walk through there in the evening. Next slide. So we've started to attract a lot of birds, and when you get a lot of birds, you also get some birders that come through. And I see one who goes through on a regular basis and talk with him, and it's always, what birds are you seeing these days? He said that he's seen the red-headed woodpeckers.
Dan, I'm giving you the 5-minute warning.
Okay, and he's seen indigo buntings in there. The picture on the left here with the two house wrens, we have a small birdhouse hanging from a serviceberry tree. And for the past 2 seasons, a pair has nested in there and produced a family. And if you go through the right time, sometime in July, basically, the parents, if you stand too near the house, will come and start screaming at you to get away from the house. So that's a fun little thing to do when they've nested. And finally, the bigger animals that we get in there. We regularly have a resident rabbit hanging out in there. The toolbox, last year it had a gaping hole in it, and one day we opened it up and a baby possum was sleeping in there. And there have even been sightings of a pair of coyotes. They weren't staying there so much as they decided to lay down in the bed and rest one evening. So we're supporting a whole lot of wildlife. It's a great place. Please take a walk through it.
Our next gardener is Dorothy Strang. She took us on an in-person tour of the Oasis garden, all the while telling us a little history, a little politics, and great enthusiasm for the gardens in this unlikely space. Dorothy, it's your turn now.
Thanks very much. Everybody hearing me? Yes? Somebody say yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm really struck that the Cornell Oasis Garden, which is a community garden, was placed on the program right after the 2 gardens in Nichols Park. There is such wonderful overlap between the things that are happening in Nichols Park and the things that are happening in the Cornell Oasis, but in a very different way. At the end of my remarks, I'll say a couple of things about what community means and what it suggests, but right now let's just visit. Everyone who does visit the Cornell Oasis agrees that it is a Hyde Park hidden gem, and the emphasis is on the word hidden. It's at roughly 48th and Cornell. If you have ever driven down Cornell to 47th Street to get on the drive going north, you have driven right by, on your left, going down to 47th Street, right by the Oasis. It is up the slope towards the Metro tracks, and unless you know it's there, you would never think it was there. So you walk down the sidewalk on the west side of Cornell, just past 48th Street, the sidewalk ends. There are two gigantic viburnum bushes that we just let grow, and then a very small dirt path that winds up through a stand of woods. If you didn't know it was leading to the community garden, you probably wouldn't take that path, this being the wild and woolly city that it is. But we take the path up through the woods. These photos were taken by Sylvia in July when in the woods was this beautiful stand of red monarda bee balm, which blooms along with lots of other things that were planted by the woman who established this garden. Her name is Gerda Schild. She died in 2012. The Cornell Oasis was the third of her community gardens that she established in East Hyde Park over a period of some 30 years, I think. So let's have the next slide and we'll emerge into the garden. Now, this shot we've put in, Sylvia and I decided to put in here to give you an idea about the extent of the garden. We're up on the western slope, right by the Metro tracks, or close to the Metro tracks here. But I want you to see that there are 25 or 26 garden plots, all raised bed garden plots on the flat part of this space. It is Park District land, so we are required, as all community gardeners in Chicago are required, to have at least, I think it's 8 inches of soil above native soil, because Chicago native soil is filled with all kinds of toxic things, including lead. So the Park District insists that, and rightly so, that anything that you're going to grow that's going to go into your mouth ought to have plenty of new fresh soil from a reliable source. So we have 26 gardeners. Next slide, George, and we'll go in closer to look at our shared tools. We share tools, and over on the right, you see not only a little sign that says that in 2019, the Cornell Oasis won a Park District Community Garden Award, but you also see those blue and yellow rain barrels. The rain barrels is our source of water. And George, if you'll pull back to show the hoses, which is the photograph just below the rain barrels. Yes, that is our water source. Now it stays coiled up there until a team of 3 people run this hose down the slope, across Cornell, through the cyclone fence, all the way over to the drinking fountain behind the ball field, the baseball field that's there. The Park District has given us the proper tool to open the cistern so we can attach our hose. And then it takes roughly an hour and a half to fill up all the water barrels. I think there are 12 of them, maybe 13 in our garden. Last summer, when we were officially not supposed to garden, there was no water. And those of us who went ahead and gardened anyway, hauled all our own water in whatever ways we could invent from home. So we depend upon the Park District for some ease of water and those nice water barrels.
Dorothy,
Right.
your 5-minute mark.
Oh dear, we're gonna have to zoom along. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Along the Cornell side We have communal spaces. In the middle, we have people who garden in all kinds of ways, some neat and some not so neat. George, keep on going. This, whoop, that was too fast because that was my garden, the last one. I have raised beds and I do herbs, culinary, in this bed, culinary herbs and cutting flowers. I don't do veggies because we have great farmers markets, but next slide, please. Lots of folks simply want to grow a tomato. This is my other bed, which is perennial herbs and a lot of the medicinal herbs over near the tools. And those are my two pet projects. You see some tick seed down there with a black swallowtail. Part of what I plant are wildflowers like the meadow over in Nichols Park. Next slide, please. We'll keep moving along here. Where are we here? Just some more nice shots. Now, if you'll stop on that one, going up that slope towards the metro tracks, the photograph on the right, on the left-hand side, you'll see some fresh mulch and some native grasses. I'm trying to establish native grasses, particularly prairie grasses, up that slope and then in a new bed at the top. That is my project. Over on the left, it's a little hard to see, but someone has made a very nice wire trellis and taken some real care. Next slide, please. This is a tribute to Sylvia, who took the photographs and loves beetles. Next slide, please. They're beautiful beetles. She doesn't even know, oh, sunflower beetle. Here is another project on the communal slope up towards the metro tracks. The coordinator of the garden is Hal Cohen, whom you may know if you are a birder in Hyde Park. And he has created a water garden. We have no water, but he's created a really nice water garden. And it was incomplete when Sylvia took these photos, or Glenn perhaps. It is now complete and it's beautiful. Now all we have to find is a source of water. Okay, next slide, please. Again, this is I think our almost ending shot. Community garden, you know, is a public space. Everyone has access to it, and we love it when people come through and enjoy it. But it's also an individual space. It's a place for people who don't have backyards, who have no plot of ground to plant those tomatoes or that stand of zinnias. So we appreciate it for that. And I think the last shot is maybe chairs. George, let's see what the last photo is. Yes, we do sit and contemplate because, of course, a community garden is to be shared with other people. And lots of folks walk through. There's also a path that has been tended all the way to 47th Street if you want to walk down that path through the woods. And we know the power of gardens to heal, to bring people together, to get us through hard days and beautiful days. And that, my friends, is the Cornell Oasis. I invite you to come visit.
Thank you, Dorothy. That was lovely. Our next presenter, unfortunately, has a family emergency and couldn't be with us today, but we do have her wonderful program, which Susan is going to present instead. So the Bronwyn Nichols Lodato is the president of the Midway Plaisance Advisory Council, and she is promoting. She just wants people to come and visit because it's just so beautiful, and so we hope everybody will come and visit, and maybe this will inspire people to visit more. Susan?
Unmute, Susan. Susan, unmute.
Thank you. Sorry. So what I will try to fill in for Bronwyn. She was the founder and the president of the Midway Plaisance Advisory Council, which was founded to basically preserve and protect and promote this beautiful space. We all know about the Midway. It's there. It's been there since the 1893 World's Fair, and it connects. And well, it was founded first by Henry by Olmsted, and it was to connect Jackson Park and Washington Park. And George and Sylvia, please jump in and help me if I'm leaving something out. Um, and during the Columbia or during the World's Fair, it was a midway, and it was the home of the first um, Ferris wheel and lots of concessions and food stands and so forth. And then it kind of uh, went into neglect for a while, and there have been various efforts to revive it. And most recently, the university has put in the winter garden, which is um, just lovely. And Sylvia has some wonderful photos that she'll share with us. But let me
Let's
just
look at some flowers.
yes,
Can
and
we look at the flower we are?
right.
Okay.
But so here, one of the things that the um, advisory council has worked on is both to protect and to preserve and to clean up and beautify. And they have planted for 3 years running. They have received small grants and lots of volunteer energy to plant along the embankment along the tracks. And here you see some of the spring flowers as a result of all the planting. Crocuses and daffodils primarily. And I think George, let's just move. Yeah, just keep going. More of this. One of the nice things about this area is the Cheney Good Bench, which, if you don't know anything about it, you should look it up. It's really very interesting. It's dedicated to, and it's probably the only, or one of the only few memorials to women activists in Chicago. And Flora Cheney and Catherine Good were active in the women's rights movement and in various other endeavors on the south side of Chicago. I believe Good was no Cheney was first elected to the legislature, and then when she died, Good was reelected to
That's
fill
right.
her place. I wasn't sure. Maybe it's the reverse order. One, anyway, the two of them really held the same seat, one following after the other. And very interesting women. And the bench has been neglected. It was a lot of graffiti on it. The fountain there, I think, was is no longer there, or is it restored? Um, but there are numerous efforts to rebuild and restore it, and of course the flowers around it enhance it, and it's a good place to sit and contemplate the spring flowers. Here's the master plan.
I think Bronwyn had a master plan that she was going to tell us about, but I don't think we really quite know what it was. But she was interested in promoting this to the people outside Chicago to come for a visit here and enjoy the parks. So we will move on to the next one and see what it is that she liked. She does have a special canopy project. Do you know what the project was, Susan?
Well, the tree canopy is very special in the Midway. It's been redeveloped. George, you could probably help out here. A lot of the trees along the Midway fell victim to the Dutch elm disease and were taken down, and this has been the effort to replace them. The tree canopy is part of an overall effort both to promote the beautification of the area as well as environmental benefits. And um, if you walk along the Midway now, as you can see, you can walk under the shade of the trees.
We've reached the 5-minute mark on this presentation.
Okay, just quickly then, there's going to be an inventory of the tree canopy on the 20th of August, and Bronwood would love to have volunteers join um, for the inventory of the trees. And this is part of a master plan, not just with the Midway Plaisance, but it involves Morton Arboretum and Chicago Planning Committee and a number of other environmental groups in the area. Um, and is an important effort, our contribution to the betterment and improvement of our environment. And
These are photographs from the Winter Garden. And as you see, it's really developed. I remember it from long back, but now the trees are creeping around the seats and there's lots of places to sit and enjoy. And it is just so beautiful. Can we have the next slide? There's hydrangeas, and there are hostas, and there are the cranberries. And I'm not quite sure what the spiky things at the back are, but there's such interesting textures. In the early spring, they have hellebores. There's always something going. We have the next slide. This is in sort of close to where that statue is, the roses. And I sort of like this green and yellow study here of the tansies and the, I guess it's yarrow, and the blues and the greens from the evergreens, and the yucca or whatever it is here that's variegated. I was sort of like that. Next slide. Oh, and this is after you've walked through the Winter Garden, take a look back. And this is the view. You'd never know there were paths in there. It's rather like Dorothy's Oasis. It's all hidden away. So that's the last slide of Bronwyn's presentation. And oh, now we have Marilyn's garden. And let's see, let me look at my notes. So I'm going to introduce both our new gardeners together, but they'll show them one at a time. Now, when we're walking through Hyde Park, we really enjoy the front gardens and parkways, but rarely do we get to see the beauties hidden away from the street. Today, Marilyn Murray and Melissa Shakeman will show us their hidden gardens behind those fences. That will be a wonderful treat. First of all, Marilyn, would you like to talk about your garden?
Unmute.
Unmute.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yeah. Oh, good. All right. I was saying it's a tough act to follow coming right after the Midway Plaisance Gardens. We're going to make an abrupt transition to a very small backyard garden that's about 900 square feet. So give you a minute to adjust. A little background. This is the backyard of a townhouse at 54th and Greenwood. And my husband and I have lived here for 24 years. And small backyard with a deck, pretty typical of Chicago. And because we lost the focal point of our garden last year in a big storm, we lost a 30-foot linden tree during the derecho just about a year ago. And so that really changed everything in the garden just because of the change from a very shady space to full sun. So had the tree taken away, made it, just took a lot of things out. We had to relocate all the hostas to the other side to the side of the house where there was more shade. And then we worked with a landscape designer to come up with this design for the backyard, which was planted in April. So just a few features here, try to be quick. We do benefit from the huge trees that are on the parkway. So we still get shade from those trees, but we were desperate to have some kind of shade. And of course, it'll take a while. We have a new maple tree, which is in the center by the fence. And in the fall, that will have red leaves, which should be really pretty. And then the other tree, which is actually a little closer than it appears in this photo, is Acousa Dogwood. So that should be very pretty in the spring. And just to have, fast growing plants that do well in the sun, the grasses that you see in the foreground and also in the back corner are doing spectacularly. We have hydrangeas and then the Shasta Daisies, which actually were moved from the original garden, and now they're in a location with much more sun and they're just going bonkers. And then in the very foreground, those are just annuals. Those are petunias that are in flower boxes. So this actually is the view out our living room window, which really faces south. So we wanted something nice to look at, after we lost the tree and everything that went with it. Okay, next slide, please, George. Okay, so one of the real pleasures of living in the city is just having a little interaction with wildlife, nature. So we have a frequent visitor. This cardinal comes to the bird bath quite a bit, and we've also been enjoying the arrival of the Monarch Butterflies. I'm sure this one probably was over in the wildflower meadow before he made it over to our yard. So that's been a lot of fun during this season. So it's nice to have that, so close, just right outside the door. Next slide, please. So these pictures were taken in the spring, actually, probably in very early May. So the garden was, brand new at that point, and just wanted to show how there is a deck with an umbrella. That's the shade that we have now. And there is a Japanese maple behind the umbrella, which has been there since we've lived in the house. So that survived the big upheaval. And then the other photo is just looking toward the street. And so the big trees on the parkway, houses that are across the street, and then the small new trees that you see are service berries. So the plan is for those to grow in, and they'll provide some more privacy than the privacy fence that we have. And in the foreground, there are yew bushes, the Hicksai yew, and then some grasses and some low sumacs. So those are all growing in nicely. Next slide, please. And then just to focus in on the grasses, I found these to be a lot of fun. On the right, I just love the name of this grass, the Burgundy bunny grass, and we have had some bunnies in the yard. The burgundy color is showing now, and actually now they're actually having some nice little tassels that are coming up. And then on the left is blue switch grass. Love the name, heavy metal. That's just been growing leaps and bounds. So just perfect for a space where you're just trying to get something established so that there's something green to look at. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and the flowers, the Shasta Daisies, took this photo right after an afternoon rainstorm, and they just perk up and they're so delightful. And then the hydrangeas starting to turn from cream to pink. So we're certainly enjoying that little transition. Next slide. And then just, I don't know if this is a hidden garden, but it is behind a fence. I have to give my husband credit for actually building by hand the privacy fence. When we moved in 24 years ago, it was the wrought iron. There were a lot of arborvitae that have since died, but needed the privacy, and he actually built it, built it by hand. And so what we have for the neighbors to enjoy, the clematis vines, which are, again, just going great. And then the ground cover is a plant from Southeast Asia, actually called Liriope, rhymes with calliope. And it's nice and spiky. And we've been told that it definitely is dog proof. So get a lot of nice comments from the neighbors as they walk their dogs and just enjoy the vibe on Greenwood Avenue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's so nice. I think it's interesting. We're really learning quite a lot from different gardens about the grasses. It's something that we really should pursue. And one thing I wanted to know was, has that bunny grass gone more burgundy yet?
Yes, it actually. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yes, more burgundy. Yes.
It's how gardens change are also interesting.
Yes.
Anyway, it's now Melissa's garden, so we can see behind her fence. It's all yours, Melissa.
Well, hello. I have learned so much from listening to this. I'm just feeling very inspired and very enthusiastic. And I need that inspiration and enthusiasm because I have been a little bit sick for a while. And I'm just now getting enough energy to go outside and start doing again. So thank you for all that information. I can't wait to visit all these gardens. But what I decided to do was to just tell you some experiences that I've had. We've lived at 1360 East 56th Street for 23 years. And we were privileged to purchase not only a house, but the side and front garden that went with it. It was very well designed, and that made it easier to start gardening because I had absolutely no experience. I've never done any gardening before. But despite the fact that the garden was well designed, as people have mentioned, gardens change, plants change, conditions changed. So sometimes plants that are very abundant nearly disappear the next year. Sometimes plants actually motate. My monk seal will just show up in 10 feet away from where I thought it was going to be. So I'm sorry, I don't know why I got a phone call, but what I'd like to emphasize is this change that I constantly deal with. And sometimes, a whole anchor of your garden can disappear. That's what happened to the monk pine that we had. It was a really important feature in the design of our garden, and it began to die. And I talked to a tree man and I had it treated, but it died. And so I needed to try to figure out what to do about that. And I can't say that I've entirely succeeded yet. Maybe somebody will come over and give me some good ideas, or maybe I will simply buy another Mugo plant. I'm not sure about that. But what has worked well has been these anemones. They came with the garden, and I discovered when we came back from where we had been living during COVID, that these plants that had once been low are now about 4 feet tall and very numerous, very dense. And I think I know why that happened, but George or somebody can tell me, maybe. I think that they did that simply because nobody was digging around in the garden, and the rhizomes or the connecting roots got stronger, and we have what looks like an almost different garden now. Is that the reason, George?
That's a good explanation as I've heard.
Okay, so that's one of the things that's been a really nice surprise. And if we could go to the next slide, I'll show you something else. This is maybe not appreciated by people who just walk down the street, but this was also part of the design of the garden. It is what I call the bower, and it's almost a canopy at the top. And many birds live there, and it's very enjoyable. Way at the top is where our bedroom windows are, and we wake up hearing the birds. I had a neighbor who used to say, "Those damn birds." But for me, it's a pleasure. And this canopy is, we had to have it cut back considerably when we got here because it had just practically enveloped the porch, and we could almost not walk from the sidewalk through to the door. I mean, it was that dense. But now that it's cut back, it's still very enjoyable. And the thing that it's made up of, this was designed long before we arrived, but it's burning bush
5 minutes.
along the fence. And then,
Melissa, you're at
Hawthorne.
5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, my goodness. Hawthorns to the side and the evergreens around the porch itself. Okay, next slide. I'll hurry. Oh, the hydrangea's gone. One of the things we did was plant a big, or at the time it was a small, smooth hydrangea plant to separate the front and the back. And that's another thing that seems to have benefited greatly from not being touched. Over 2 years, nobody tried to prune it or cut back the blossoms after nothing was done to it for 2 years. And now it is more than 10 feet tall and it's just covered with blossoms. But this is a quick look at what we did with the back. The back used to be a basketball court, and nobody in my family was very interested in that, although all the neighborhood kids were sorry to see it go. But we put in a small pool instead, a swimming pool. And we tried to make sure that it was really easy to take care of. So all the plants are easy to grow perennials. We make pots of annuals, just for fun. But the basic perimeter is all easy to grow. And you can see that there's black-eyed Susan and phlox and monarda and daylilies, all that stuff. But the most, slide please. Oh, there's the hydrangea. In this, I had forgotten where it was. But in addition to those things that I mentioned, we put clematis on the fence and on the back of the garage. And we had to have honeysuckle because to me, that's summer. That smells like summer. So I think what I want to say is that I am not a gardener, really. I don't do things like read seed catalogs all winter long, things like that. I do this primarily by visiting Gethsemane, seeing what I like, and then seeing if I can make it work in my garden. And I've learned over time how to solve some of the puzzles of shade and sun. And oh, there is one more slide. Yes, one more, please. Yes, and that's this one. I've learned how to solve some of those problems of how much to water, when to water, and all of that. And through these 23 years of experimentation, I've enjoyed learning. But that's my story. Anybody who would ever like to come and walk through the garden with me, maybe give me suggestions about things they've learned, I'd be really happy to see you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I think I'd like to take you up on that invitation sometimes. I'll send you an email.
Absolutely. It's a sincerely given invitation, anybody.
Wow, that's wonderful. We walked past yours, as I've said, I walk past this garden on the way to the swimming pool when it's open.
That's right. You
So
told me.
I'm familiar with what's just those anemones. I'm really familiar with. Anyway, this is my turn, I guess. For 23 years, I worked at the university, and I don't know when the Midway plants, the winter garden, was put in, but I do remember that these trees were tiny. When it started out, they were really small, and the changes have been quite amazing. Next slide. Several of these pictures are exactly the same plants, just looking a different way. But I like all the colors, the different colors of the different trees, and I forgot, they're spruces, aren't they? The Colorado blue spruce and all the other different greens and yellows that are there. And next. And it's amazing in all seasons. Here we get the bright colors of summer and the very bland colors of winter. And this particular year, the students built snowman. So he was there for a long time. I think that was a long winter, long lot of snow that winter. Next slide. I think this must be one reason this is called the winter garden. It's just as beautiful in winter as it is in summer. And these are dogwood on the left, and I don't know what it is on the right, but right now that plant is all green and fluffy. So when you sit on that seat, there's all this airy plant around. But in the winter, it becomes so colorful when my garden is all brown. So next slide. And of course, these are taken over the years. And I like butterflies and beetles. The one on the left is a question mark, and you can see that little tiny white mark on its hind wing, and that's what tells me it's a question mark. The middle one is a black swallowtail. In Dorothy's picture, it didn't have the red and stuff. I think that's because we were looking at his back. And the other one is a spangled fritillary. This picture was taken in 2017, and I was thinking I had seen it since, until last week when one floated through my garden. So I was so pleased to see it. Next slide. And here we have Linné, who presides over this garden. I think he's just a magnificent statue. We have lunch sitting in this little courtyard with he's got a very benevolent sort of look to him. Anyway, on the left, this is Linné with cherry blossoms, and on the right with snowflakes. Next, I think maybe there isn't a next, yes. Now these are our gardeners, and without them, we would not have had this show. So I thank all of you for sharing with us all your favorite gardening stories. We have the next slide. And these are the people who have worked quite hard over quite a few months to make this actually work. It just takes several people, the input of several people, lots of ideas to make the whole thing work. And our new person in this has been George, and I had trouble with presenting it on my computer. And it was wonderful to have him take it over and do it for us. Thank you, George.
And I need to jump in here and say thank you to Sylvia Dawson, because we would not have this program if it weren't for Sylvia. And she's worked individually with each of the gardeners and put it all together and put the slides together. And so she's the curator and the producer. And thank you, Sylvia.
Oh, it's really a lot of fun, especially meeting the other gardeners.
So
Okay.
we're over time for our typical ending time. That's not to say that if others want to stay on, you can't ask them questions. On behalf of the village, though, I just want to say this has been another wonderful presentation. It's so enjoyable to hear about everyone's garden, and it would be great to see them in person, but it's under the circumstances, it's been every bit as fascinating to hear you, to see what you've done and to hear you talk about it. And your enthusiasm and pride is comes across, and for very good reason. So we really do want to thank all of you. Are there any quick questions before we wrap up? There's a lot of complimentary comments in the chat box. People seem to really have enjoyed this, and it's been a hit. I would say it's been truly enjoyed by everybody who was able to attend today.
I have a quick announcement.
Go ahead, Terry.
This comes from Kathy Williams. If we so enjoyed the Nichols Park, we can do it tomorrow evening at 6:30. The Grant Park Music Festival concert in the parks is going to be in Nichols Park tomorrow evening at 6:30. So you have to bring your own chair or blanket, but our food and drink. But it's a time to gather in the park and see some of the stuff that we've noticed.
Okay.
Susan, I think we probably should wrap up because we're over time. But again, thank you all very, very much. And not only for today's presentation, but for what you do to beautify Hyde Park and our neighborhoods, because you definitely make it a special place to live. So thank you once again. I think we'll try to do something next year. Who knows what situation we'll be in then, but this certainly works as a virtual program. And we probably get to see many more gardens in an hour than we would if we were moving from place to place. So anyway, thank you all very, very much, George and everybody, and Susan and Sylvia and all of our gardeners. Thank you so much for bringing this to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.